Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to crack open a really powerful technique for understanding, well, just about any complex business process. And you're not going to believe it, but the key is actually hidden inside a story you've known your entire life. Yep, we're talking about event storming, using the Cinderella method.
I know what you're thinking, right? What on earth can a story about glass slippers and pumpkins possibly teach you about your team's workflow or your next big project? Well, it turns out, a whole lot. The way this classic story is structured gives us the perfect blueprint for getting literally everyone on the same page.
All right, so let's do a quick refresh on the story of Cinderella. We all know the basics. You know, a kind girl, some not-so-kind stepsisters, a big royal party, a little bit of magic. But today, we're going to look at it through a brand new lens. We're going to focus on the key moments, the things that actually push the story forward.
Okay, think about this exact moment. It is a massive turning point. A second before this, Cinderella's stuck. Her situation feels totally hopeless. The appearance of the fairy godmother, that's a distinct, pivotal event. Everything that comes after is a direct result of this one thing happening. And here's another one, a moment of pure tension and consequence. The magic has an expiration date. This single event, the clock striking midnight, it triggers this frantic escape and completely changes the vibe of the whole evening. It's an absolutely critical point on our timeline.
And finally, this little accident. This is the event that sets up the entire final act of the movie. I mean, without this happening, how does the prince ever find her? He doesn't. This tiny mistake becomes the single most important clue in the whole story. You see? These aren't just plot points. They're distinct, game-changing events. So, you can see what we're doing here, right? By pulling out these key moments, the godmother appearing, the clock striking 12, the slipper getting lost, we're shifting how we look at the story. We're not just telling it anymore, we're breaking it down into its most critical building blocks. This is what we call thinking in events.
So let's make it official. In the world of event storming, an event is just a key moment in a process or a story. And this is crucial. It's always written in the past tense. Godmother appeared. Clock struck midnight. Slipper was lost. That past tense framing is so important because it means it's a fact. It's something that has already happened in the story we're mapping out.
Okay, so how do we take this cool idea and turn it into something practical, like a workshop? Well, that's where event storming really comes to life. And you'll be surprised, it's a super simple, low-tech process that takes a group of people from total confusion to crystal clarity, all by building a story together, one sticky note at a time.
Honestly, it all comes down to these 3 simple steps. First, everyone in the room grabs a bunch of sticky notes and just quietly, on their own, writes down every single event they can think of for the process we're looking at. Then, everybody goes up to a big wall and puts their notes up, trying to get them in some kind of chronological order. And then, this is the most important part, we talk.
And this is what it starts to look like. All of a sudden, you've got this visual timeline of the entire process, built from the brains of everyone in the room. You can literally see the story flow from left to right, from ball announced, all the way over to prince searches. But if you look a little closer, you start to notice some really interesting things.
And this right here is the million-dollar question. Because I promise you, when you do this with your own team, you will discover that not everyone has the same story in their head. What one person calls order confirmed, another person thinks of as payment processed. So what happens when all these slightly different perspectives end up on the same timeline?
What you see here, this wall of colorful stickies, it looks like a mess. And that is exactly the point. You'll see the same event written down 5 times. You'll spot huge gaps where someone totally forgot a step. You'll find notes that seem to completely contradict each other. But in event storming, this mess isn't a problem. It's the gold. It's the raw material we need to create a shared understanding.
This is where the real magic happens. Those duplicates, those gaps, those different viewpoints, they're basically big flashing signs that say, talk about this. They're the moments where all the hidden assumptions people have finally come out into the open. See, the goal isn't for one person to be right. It's for the entire group to come together and build one complete, accurate story that everybody can agree on.
And this comparison just lays it out perfectly. On the left, you've got the old way of doing things, right? Everybody's working in their own little world, on their own assumptions, which leads to hidden problems and misunderstandings. But on the right, you've got the event storming way, which forces all those gaps and assumptions out into the light and builds a truly collaborative, shared knowledge of how things really work.
If you remember just one thing from all of this, let it be this.
The entire goal of event storming is to create one shared story. Getting there means you have to show up ready to listen, be okay with being wrong, and understand that the mess we talked about isn't chaos, it's discovery. The point isn't for one person to win an argument, it's for everyone to build a single timeline that the whole team, from sales to engineering, can look at and say, yes, that is how this works.
Okay, so we've used a fairy tale to get the concept down. Now, how do we actually apply this to our day-to-day work? Well, the great news is you can use this method to map out pretty much any process in your business. It's an incredibly flexible tool.
So, for example, you could map out a customer's entire journey, from the first time they ever hear about your product to the moment they become a huge fan. Or you could plan out a really complex new software feature by mapping all the events. You could even use it to figure out a clunky internal process, or just to make sure everyone is on the same page for a new project kickoff. The possibilities are endless.
And really, that's the heart of it. The process is simple, the materials are cheap, sticky notes and markers, and the results can be absolutely game-changing. The best way to really get it is to just try it. So get your team together, remember that every single perspective is valuable, and have some fun finally telling your story together.
So I'll just leave you with this one question to chew on. What's that one process, that one customer journey, or that one project in your company that always seems to cause the most arguments and confusion? Yeah, that one. That's probably the very first story your team needs to tell together.